There is a moment, quiet and unguarded, when a single person begins to take up more space in the mind than they ever did in the world. A glance becomes a replay. A conversation becomes a doorway. A possibility becomes a pulse that refuses to settle. This is how limerence often begins, not as love, but as longing dressed in urgency. It feels electric, inevitable, almost sacred. Yet beneath the brightness lies a quieter truth. Limerence is less about another person and more about the parts of the self still waiting to be seen, chosen, or understood. It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a small light flickering at the edge of an ordinary moment. A smile that lingers, a voice that softens something inside, a brief connection that feels strangely significant, even if nothing outwardly remarkable has happened. People rarely notice the shift as it starts. The mind leans forward, the heart takes a small step closer. There is a warmth, unexpected, unreasonably hopeful, carried in the presence of another person who seems to awaken something dormant. Soon, the imagination begins to fill in the spaces. A casual interaction becomes a sign. A minor gesture becomes a message. The mind rereads the moment again and again, searching for nuance, meaning, possibility. At first, it feels harmless, even sweet, an emotional spark that colors the day with subtle anticipation. Yet beneath the softness lies the beginning of a pattern, a growing focus, a sensitivity to every cue, every detail, every imagined implication. What starts as curiosity slowly becomes preoccupation. This is the doorway into limerence, where interest blends with longing, and longing transforms into an emotional current too strong to ignore. It's a state that feels strangely personal, as though destiny has quietly brushed against the edges of a normal life. But the truth is gentler and more human. The first spark often reveals not who another person is, but who someone hopes they might become in the presence of being seen. Limerence does not appear without history. It grows from older emotional soil, quiet places within a person where certain needs were never fully met, or where affection arrived inconsistently, leaving a lingering hunger for certainty, warmth, and recognition. For some, it traces back to childhood moments that felt small at the time. A parent too distracted to notice subtle distress, affection offered in unpredictable waves, or praise tied to performance rather than presence. These experiences settle inside, shaping an unspoken belief that love is something to be earned or imagined. When someone later encounters a person who seems kind, attentive, or simply possible, the mind reacts not only to the present moment, but to the echoes of all those past longings. The new person becomes a symbol, an emotional placeholder for safety, validation, or the closeness once craved but never fully received. This is why limerence feels familiar. Even when the individual is new, it awakens old templates, the desire to be chosen, the fear of not being enough, the longing to finally experience the affection once fantasized about in quieter years. In this way, limerence becomes less about attraction and more about emotional memory, a reenactment of ancient hopes, a resurfacing of forgotten aches. Here, the heart is not simply reaching outward, it is reaching backward, searching for the moments where recognition was missing and imagining that this person now might finally answer the questions left behind. Beneath the emotional intensity of limerence lies a precise and predictable biology. The experience feels mystical, but the brain treats it like a cycle, one driven by anticipation, reward, and the intoxicating uncertainty of desire. Dopamine is the first voice in the chorus. Each interaction, each memory, each imagined possibility triggers a small surge, creating a loop that the mind quickly learns to crave. But it is not the presence of the person that fuels it. It is the maybe, the unanswered questions, the possibility of reciprocation suspended in ambiguity. Neuroscience shows that intermittent reinforcement, moments of connection mixed with moments of doubt, is one of the strongest forms of psychological conditioning. It trains the brain to hold on tighter, think more, hope more. In limerence, the mind begins constructing elaborate narratives to sustain the fantasy, replaying conversations, searching for clues, and amplifying the smallest details into emotional significance. Cognition becomes intertwined with compulsion. Every thought strengthens neural pathways that make the person feel increasingly essential. The brain, hungry for the next dopamine spike, keeps returning to them like a familiar song. This is why limerence is not simply infatuation. It behaves more like an emotional feedback loop, self-perpetuating, absorbing, and difficult to interrupt. The person becomes both the trigger and the cure, the source of tension and the imagined relief. A closed circuit of longing, a psychological rhythm that feels irresistible because the brain itself has learned to dance to it. As limerence deepens, a quiet divide forms inside. One part of the mind longs for closeness, replaying every hopeful detail like a cherished film. The other part watches with caution, sensing that the story being built may rest on fragile ground. This tension creates an inner tug-of-war, gentle at first, then steadily exhausting. People in limerence often know on some level that the attachment is unbalanced. They recognize the gaps between fantasy and reality. Yet the emotional pull continues, fueled by the possibility that the next moment might finally provide clarity, confirmation, or connection. The hope persists even when evidence remains thin. This is where resistance emerges. Not the resistance to the person, but to the truth. A truth that whispers softly that the longing has become a shelter, a distraction, a mirror reflecting unspoken fears of loneliness, invisibility, or inadequacy. The mind tries to reason its way out of the fixation, while the heart reinforces it with imagined meanings. The result is an internal dialogue that never fully rests. Days become filled with subtle monitoring of signs, nights with imagined conversations. The emotional landscape narrows until everything begins to orbit around a single person. In this conflict, exhaustion grows quietly, not from loving too much, but from carrying the weight of uncertainty alone. The longing becomes heavy, the fantasy becomes fragile, and somewhere inside, a gentle awareness begins to rise, signaling that something must shift. The change does not arrive dramatically. There is no sudden release, no cinematic revelation. Instead, the turning point appears softly, often in a single, honest moment when the mind grows tired of its own spirals. A moment when the person begins to see not just the other, but themselves within the longing. This realization is gentle. The fixation was never about possessing another heart. It was about filling an inner space that felt unfinished. The person who inspired the longing becomes less of a symbol and more of a human being, flawed, limited, incapable of carrying the weight placed upon them. And with this clarity, the fantasy loosens. Healing begins quietly, not by forcing detachment, but by allowing truth to settle, by recognizing the projections, the idealizations, the emotional echoes from the past. A softness returns to the self, a sense of compassion for the parts that sought refuge in the intensity of limerence. Integration is the slow process of coming home, reclaiming attention, rebuilding inner steadiness, understanding that longing can teach, even when it distorts. By the end, limerence leaves behind a subtle imprint, not a scar, but a reminder of the human capacity to yearn so deeply it reshapes perception. The story closes with a quieter heart, one that no longer chases a single possibility, but instead listens inward to the deeper places that once ached to be filled. And in that stillness, something essential is found. Not the person who sparked the obsession, but the self who finally learned to understand it.